Hey guys, in this video we've got the Traxxas Xmaxx and this is the build for Tina. So in this one we're going to put this together the way she wants it, and to start with it's going to get the wide arms on it. So these are basically the arms that come on the XRT now, and we're going to put these on it to make it a little bit more stable for her. We're also going to add the XRT tires and wheels to it. That'll look pretty cool, and we'll throw a couple of amenities in there to make it look nice, and we'll add a couple of things to make it just a bit more durable. This should be a pretty good video, guys. This one's for Tina. Let's get this done. Okay, so before we start tearing this thing apart, I thought you'd like to see what we've got for problems here. And we took this out for a test run, and have a look at this. So right in here, this hub carrier, the knuckles, all that stuff, it's all broken in there, and that stemmed from losing one of them little pin shafts that holds everything together up in here, and it allowed it to move and break. We have all new components for that, so we will be tearing that apart. The rest of this truck's in pretty good condition, so let's get it down on the bench and let's yank it apart.
All right, so this is the Wide-Maxx kit, and right here is the big packet that's got the new coil springs and it has the steering links in it. Here's the new drive axles we're going to need. These are the upper and lower arms for the system, and here's the instructions, and these should show you everything you need to know about how to install the kit. It looks like a pretty good kit here, and it looks like it'll be pretty simple for installation. Okay, so let's begin with a high-speed teardown. This is basically removing all the arms, the bumpers, and whatnot. So we're going to go through this rather quickly because taking things apart is generally pretty simple. So let's just pull it apart and then we'll get on with the build.
All right, so we sped through the dismantling of this thing because it's pretty simple pulling screws and whatnot, and it wasn't a big deal. We did put all the screws in one container, and we're going to go in depth on how to put it back together. We did stop and do a little cleanup, and things look a lot better now. The shocks look pretty good, but we do have to take these apart anyway because we got to change the fluid in them, we got to change the springs, and we got to put the shock covers on. And we're going to start with that, so that'll be pretty good. The main chassis is in good shape. We do have the bell cranks. Those were broken. I talked to the guy that owned it and he knew they were broken. I was unaware of that, and the tops were still holding, but the bottom brackets were broken. So we'll be changing those as well, and then we'll build the arms and we'll put it all back together. So this is the part you've been waiting for, to see how it goes together with the stuff on it. So once you get it stripped down like this, it should go pretty easily. So let's get down with the shocks and get started.
So let's begin with the shock absorbers, and these are pretty good sized. Xmaxx is a big truck after all. So there's a screw right here, and you need to back this screw out so that you can remove this collar, and the collar is the spring retention unit. So you're going to want to pull down and separate it from the link at the end, like so. Compress the spring and slide the collar off, just like that, and then you can remove the spring. Perfect, just like that. Let's do a little cleanup here just to make sure that things are functioning properly, and then just running a nut driver through here or a hex driver, you can back this cap off, which will give you access to the fluids inside. There is a bladder cap right here, don't lose that. Now that fluid's not looking very good. Check this out. There's a problem with the shock absorber, and we're going to need to figure out what that is. But in the short term, let's clean things up and get a start on it anyway. We'll clean things out, and this is just silicone spray. We've had no problems with this in the past, so we'll go ahead and use that just to clean out some of the fluids and get some of that dirt and debris out of it. The color is so bad on this one that there's definitely something wrong with it, so we're going to break it down a little farther here. Have a look at the end piece. There we go, just like that, and we got most of the fluids out. Let's go ahead and clean the rest of this off. We don't want to leave any of that dirty oil in there if we can help it, so we're going to do a fairly good cleanup on this. Okay, and let's just push this through and get as much cleaned out of the housing as possible, and then we'll do reassembly. There we go, everything looking pretty good. We're going to go ahead and thread it down, and we're going to adjust this collar up a little bit, because we are changing the springs, so we want to have it in a fairly neutral position. And we're going to use this 50 weight oil, and this is what we want to have in it. It calls for 40 weight, but I want to put 50 in there to give it just a little more control. Now when you fill this, you want to make sure and get all the air bubbles out. This takes a little patience, nice and slow, and just work it up and down a couple of times, and you'll see the bubbles come up out of that. See the bubbles? So you want to get those out so that you can maintain as low of an air ratio as possible. Now with the plunger all the way down in there, we want to put this cap on here, and that will keep the air from mixing with the oil. That's what that's for. So you want to be full up to that cap, but not over full. And then as things collapse and retract, that will take up space without letting the oil mix with the air. So you always want to have your shaft pushed all the way in when you do this, so you don't have compression when you completely collapse it. Let's go ahead and sort out these springs, and they look like a pretty good jumble, but they do come apart easy enough. So here's the new one. And we're going to put these covers on them to give it some protection and make it look good all at the same time. So these covers are pretty cool. We've got them on a couple of the other vehicles, and they do a pretty good job of keeping the dirt off the shafts and whatnot. So this is the hard way to do it. So fishing it down over the coil spring just like that, it looks pretty easy, but it does allow it to get stuck on the coils as you try to fish it the rest of the way through. So it can be a bit of a bear to do it this way. It's definitely the hard way. All right, now we're going to fish the shock through there, and be real careful not to push the other end loose as far as the cover goes. Keep it tucked in. Pull down evenly, and we're going to put that collar back on. Just like that. We've got to get it lined up because it has to snap into that end piece. You'll feel it when it goes. There we go. Just like that. And then gently put the spring up against it. There you go. And then we need to put that screw back. That retention screw will keep everything together under heavy impacts and things like that. So there's the shock absorber right there.
Okay, so I know the sound quality is not the greatest right here because I don't have my stuff on, but at the same time, there's a much easier way to install these. Now, these can be fussy when you get over the springs because they can slip inside of there and whatnot. So what we're going to do here is I just happen to have a piece of PVC, and this is 3/4 inch, and you could use bigger, but this will slide right over it. This is nice, right? So if you get a look at it like that, it'll slide right over it. So before we do this, we're going to slip this onto the PVC, and it'll go right on because it's smooth. So you just slip it on like so. Okay, now we're going to set everything out of the way here for a second, and we're going to go ahead and bring this up to us. Okay, so now this is on the uphill side. Bring your spring in from the bottom. Okay, turn this around and set it like so, and just open this throat on this. And since that tube's inside, it'll slip right onto it, just like this. There we go. And it goes right on. It's way easier that way. and then all you have to do is tuck in your ends. So you even this out a little bit, tuck your ends in like so, and it makes it a much simpler task. And if you'll notice over here, I've already got 3 of these done, and it didn't click until the second one that this is the way to go about it. So use the PVC if you have some. A piece of sprinkler tubing would probably work as well. Just as long as this will slip over it, it'll do the job. And then of course the rest of assembly is simple. So there you go. That's the trick for that. Okay, so I want to take just a minute here and talk to you about the shocks. And the shock build went okay. One of the shafts was a little bit bent, and if you notice the dark color in the fluid when we poured it out, it was all dark gray and everything. And if you ever wonder where that comes from, well, here's what it is. This came off the Sen Racing Reaper. It's a pretty good size shock absorber, but it's bent. And if you'll notice, when you push it in, it stops right there because this is bent right here. Okay, so when you retract it like this, you can feel it bind. Well, why does it bind? Does it bind on this O-ring here? Not really. That's not necessarily where it binds. What it is as the shaft goes in, there's that plunger on the end up in there, that little guy. And what happens is, when this is bent, it pushes it into the barrel. So now the plunger starts to rub against the barrel in here. And that's not okay, because aluminum's not a hard product. It's a fairly soft metal as far as that goes. And repeated rubbing of that cylinder with that plunger wears off particles and it gets in the oil, and that's where the color comes from. So if you're getting discolored oil, you're getting wear in there somewhere. And if you've got a bent shock shaft, that'll rub it against the wall in there and that'll cause that discoloration. Let's get back to the build.
Okay, so we're going to pull these arms apart and get everything cleaned up so we can put the new ones together. And we do need some of these components, so we're just going to strip these down. There we go. There's all the bearings and everything, just like that. And we'll do one of the front ones as well. We're not going to strip all 4 on camera. We'll just do one front and one rear. They're the same on each side, so you can always do the same thing for each side of the vehicle. Little trick here, just push down against the table and it pops it out. And the bearings feel a little gritty. We're going to have to do a little work on those. There we go. And now we're going to go ahead and take the axle out of it because we need to make the axles longer. So we're just going to get this little pin out, and that will allow everything to come apart. It'll fish right out. Just like that. And this is what the actual drive axle cup looks like. Now you can see the difference in length here, and that's good because the arms are longer. You got to have the new axles, and at least these will be straight, so we don't have to worry about them being bent or anything like that. They're brand new. So we'll fish them back into the cup, and we'll put the pin back through it, and that's pretty much all there is to that CV as far as building it goes. Just like that. Get it in nice and flat. Now you want to get the bearing on it, and that'll snap all the way down flush like so, and then fish it into the component itself. And these two for the rear, there's a left and a right, so be really careful which one you put into it. When you get them installed on the vehicle, there should be toe in on the rear wheels, and if you have them towed out, that means you put them on the wrong side. Building the front, it goes together pretty much the same way. It pushes through. Now we're using RPM hub carriers, and we are using an aluminum front seat carrier, and these work together really nicely. But since we're using locking hinge pins, we're going to need to drill out the arms to allow those hinge pins to go through, and they're only on the bottom arm. Just like that. And then we can put a nut on there, and that keeps things from coming apart. That's really important that you get that, because when you have a floating hinge pin in there, flex can be a problem. On the stock arms, not such a big deal, but if you switch over to RPM, they're a lot more pliable, and you will have that come apart on you, so the locking hinge pins are a really good idea. On the top, we are using the factory pins, and so you just fish it through like so. And on one side of the arm, it's capped, so you don't have to worry about it, and then there's just a retention screw that goes right there. Just like so. There we go. And that's how that looks. Nice and easy, ready to go. All right, for the front here, there are some extra components you have to put together, and those are the pins that connect the C carrier to the hub carrier. And so getting these caps on here, they can be a little frustrating at times, but there's a little cap that goes over the end of the pin. And what happened on this is the reason it was broken is we lost one of those caps. The pin came out, it got hooked up in the wheel, and it destroyed the whole front assembly. So you want to make sure you get those snug down good. Don't over tighten them, but get them snug. All right, we'll put the drive nut on there. And then we have the clip that holds it in place. And I like to use a tool to just push that on. And there you go. Beautiful. Now for the build on the car, we're going to go into the steering assembly now because we do have a problem with that being broken. So the side that connects to the servo, that one's got a broken arm on it. So we need to take this whole thing apart to get to that. And there are a number of screws in here. So I'm going to let you just watch this come apart. It's a little finicky to get that piece out, but it does go without taking anything else apart. So here we go. Just like that. And we need to detach the connection from the servo. There we go. You get that out. And now the whole assembly should pop out in your hand. Just like that. And see how that's broken? We do have a new one, so we're going to put a new one in its place. We're not going to upgrade it. We're going to stay with the stock components. But let's strip this out first and get all the bearings and everything, because we're going to need these components in the new one. Always check your bearings and make sure they're moving smoothly. There we go. And then there's a screw in here to back out that'll take the compression out of the spring, like so. And that seems to move okay. But how do you get that bearing out? Push down on the screw and it'll force the bearing right out, just like that. All right, that one felt a little gritty, so we'll put it in some fluid. All right, so assemble the new one, put the components together, and we're going to put that screw back down in there. Now compress it a little by hand and then push down and snug it down. There we go. And that feels pretty good. Now we can snap our bearings down into it, just like that. Good. Just check the flow, make sure all the bearings turn easy, and then we're going to put it back in the car. And once you've done this a time or two, it goes pretty fast. I mean, it's the same thing each time, so you know what to take apart. The first time can be a little sketchy because you wonder where all the screws go, but the second time you go through it, you'll have the experience behind you and it'll go much faster. Personally, I prefer to have the stock components in here. If I'm going to have a failure, that's where I want it to be, is right there in a part that's cheap and easy to change out. Yes, you do have to get kind of involved, and you don't have to pull the arms and stuff to do it. But at the same time, it's a really quick install. Traxxas is pretty smart about how they build things for working on them. This one goes pretty easy in and out, and they even have specific slots that you can go through to hook the arms up after. So it's pretty slick the way they do it. And there you go. Okay, now we're going to connect the arms, and we put the one screw on to hold it from the back side, one from the front. And we'll do the same thing there. We're going to put the back screw in first, install the hinge pin, and then we're going to put the front screw on. And that contains the hinge pin in place, just like that. Real nice. Okay, on the front, we're going to put the back screw in first, just like that. Stretch it over, make sure the drive shaft is in the cup, and push the pin through. Just like that. And we'll do the same thing for the other side now. Make sure it's in the drive cup for the axle. Get it lined up, and that should drop right through there with no problems. Straight up. Put the screw in for retention. Done. So the arms are on now. Let's move up to the other end of the vehicle here, and we'll get the front ones in place. So the same method applies. Get the screw in the back end first. There we go. Get the arms in place and then slide the hinge pin right in. We'll do the same thing for the other side. There we go. It's really straightforward. Once you get the feel for how this goes, it's a really straightforward build. Now we'll connect the top here, and it's the same thing. We've already put the retaining screw on the back side, so slide it through, and we'll put the screw on the front side, just like that. Slip that through, and of course, put the screw in the front to retain it. Done deal, arms are installed. Now we're going to connect the steering links, and see how the screwdriver goes down through this slot in the top? So there's a hole on the inside where the bit can go straight through it. That makes it easy to work on. Even with the machinery put together, it's pretty simple. Slide the skid plates in place and put our 4 screws in to retain it. Just like that. And of course, we've got the top 2 screws that connect it to the housing. There we go, bumper installed. We'll do the back one same way. Slides in place. You got your 4 on the bottom of the truck here. There we go. And then of course the 2 that connect it to the towers. Perfect. Now we'll get the shock absorbers in place. And these are pretty simple as well. You get them lined up, push the pin through, and then we want to get those retainer screws in place to hold everything, just like that. And we're going to connect them to the arms. The trick is to get the ball area lined up correctly so that it slides in there. They do go nicely into the arms. It's just a matter of getting those straight edges lined up with it. Once you get it lined up, it'll slide right into the arm, and the assembly is actually quite simple. There we go. Like I say, lining it up is the hard part. Just like that. Let's go to the other end, and it's the same thing up there. Nice. Now this is starting to take shape. I can see why Tina picked this color. I do like the green. And with the blue hubs that are on this truck, I don't think it'll be that big of a difference. I think you won't hardly even notice that. So let's get the XRT tires and wheels on it. And the upside is we have these because we swapped out the XRT tires and wheels for the sledgehammers. And so it's running the sledgehammers, which gave us these tires and wheels for Tina's truck, which is a really slick deal. All right. Now let's get the body on it. Here we go. Beautiful. Just like that.
All right, guys, there's the build for the Xmaxx, and I showed it to Tina, and she loves it. She likes the width and the stance on it, and it went together pretty good. We did have a little struggle with the steering arms, but that's okay. That was a pretty easy change. What it comes down to is the guy that had it before us didn't actually lube things when he cleaned it up, and the outer bearings on all four corners, the big bearings that are on the drive shaft side, were froze solid. And it was spinning them in the housing, which ruined all of the the hub carriers. So we did replace all of those. It's got all new bearings in it. One of the bearings in the steering was also locked up. When you clean these things up, guys, if you can do it without water, that's preferable, because that will prevent any corrosion in there. If you run it in water, or you do get water in it when you're rinsing it out or whatever, once you dry it out, be sure to lubricate all the bearings. That's like mandatory. If you don't do that, you need to get down into the bearings and make sure you get some lubrication in there. They'll corrode and they'll lock down, and that's what we ran into with this one. So this went together pretty good. It's a beautiful vehicle, and that's about all I can tell you on that. Thanks for getting to the end of this one. You know, we really enjoy the builds, but they are intensive to make the videos for. You can't sit down and just wrench and stuff. And the thing is this build should have went pretty fast. But when you're trying to manipulate cameras and stuff, it took 2 days to get through this and get all of the footage lined up so you could basically see what was going on. And it was a much longer build than you got to see. We edited out a whole bunch of stuff because watching us do all four corners is kind of silly. If you haven't already, don't forget to bash that like button and help our content spread. You know, we enjoy doing this and we like to help the community. If you guys have anything you'd like to add to this video, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below and help others along the way. Hey guys, for AJ Jam Studios, I'm AJ Sam. Keep wrenching, guys.